All right, welcome everyone to the next session, which is a preview of Sencha's newest product, Rapid EXTJS. My name is Marc Gusmano. I'm with Sencha, and in this session, we're going to talk about how Rapid Ext JS relates to EXT, and we'll do plenty of demos to give you an idea. We'll also talk about how you acquire the beta, which is what we're currently in right now. So looking forward to a good session. Because this is a beta product, obviously there's a lot of things that could change. We've got a handful of features in the beta, not everything, of course. So this is obviously a good opportunity to figure out what you might want in the product, to give us some feedback. The beta is allowing pretty much direct feedback to us, so we're looking forward to that. And as I said, we're going to talk about exactly what it takes to acquire the software and be part of the beta. Very straightforward. So what is Rapid Ext JS? It's a tool built inside of the Visual Studio Code editor, which allows for rapid design and development of EXTJS applications. If you've ever used our Sencha Architect tool, you'll find there are a lot of parallels to what we're doing with that Rapid Ext JS and what Architect actually does. We'll talk about the differences and the approach we're taking to build the product. We've chosen Visual Studio Code just because of its popularity. There's quite a good bit of developers and JavaScript developers in particular using VS Code. It is a free download. It is written in JavaScript, and it has a very good extension environment. So on a lot of fronts, it made a good choice as the initial foray into Rapid Ext JS. And we will see that in a bit here. So we'll talk about the product, a little bit on the background, how we got here. As I said, we'll talk about its relationship or how it compares and contrasts to our other visual development tool, Sencha Architect. We'll look at how you acquire the beta. We'll look at installing the product. I'll do a demo where I'll create a project. You'll see Rapid Ext JS in action. We'll build a very simple little form. I'll then talk about some of the plans we have for the product this year, and then we'll move on to some questions and answers. So just to give you an idea of what we're looking at here, we're really looking at providing another tool that gives you the ability to focus on building the application and really guides you through the process. Visual development, being able to drag and drop items onto a view palette, being able to write just the code that you need, allowing the environment to guide you through that. On par with some low code theories and capabilities. And this is just a little bit of details. You may have heard the product referred to as the VS Code extension for Sencha Architect. That's a mouthful. We did rename the product, and it is now Rapid EXTJS or Rapid Ext JS, depending on how you pronounce Ext JS. And as I already mentioned, it's very much integrated into the Visual Studio Code environment. And as you'll see, the beta does begin to demonstrate the kind of things we can do in that environment and the kind of capabilities that you'll see if you do acquire the beta. And Rapid Ext JS is really the final name for the product. We did have, as I said before, a previous name, but it is Rapid Ext JS. So probably one of the first questions, especially if you've used or you are familiar with Sencha Architect, is how does it compare? How is it different? How is it the same? It really does have the same purpose as Sencha Architect. Sencha Architect is our tool to allow you to do visual development of views, to drag and drop components, to write code for event handlers, things like that, to build your application for production. Those are very much the goals of Rapid Ext JS. If you've ever used Sencha Architect, you know one of the challenges of using the product is that Sencha Architect keeps track of the things that you visually design with back-end metadata, which means if you go into Sencha Architect, do some editing, do some visual development, then leave Sencha Architect and edit your code with some other editor, you will not be able to come back into Sencha Architect. It will be confused because the metadata did not keep up as you were doing external editing. One of our big goals with Rapid Ext JS is to eliminate the metadata requirement, which I think is a very good goal. So we are not going to provide metadata. It's going to be a pure JavaScript EXTJS application that we'll be editing, and we're just going to provide the tooling on top of that native environment. As I said, we are building this Rapid Ext JS environment as a VS Code extension. We do have another VS Code extension, which is we typically refer to as the VS Code plugin. That provides IntelliSense, that provides code completion. That will still exist. I could imagine a day when that extension and this Rapid Ext JS extension would merge together, but at least for the foreseeable future, we will have the Rapid Ext JS extension and the VS Code plugin, and they will work. You could have both installed, and they will work together to provide you the best experience in the VS Code environment. Behind the scenes, the Rapid Ext JS environment utilizes our open tooling EXTGen product. So EXTGen is a tool that you can download from the Node Package Manager or NPM repository, and it provides the ability to do creation of applications, monitors the build process. It allows you to build a production version of your application, very much like what Sencha Command traditionally has done. As a matter of fact, EXTGen uses Sencha Command under the covers. So we've actually brought EXTGen into the environment, takes advantage of Sencha Command, gives you a lot of new modern tooling capabilities, like, for example, the ability to use other NPM modules within your Sencha application. And now we're going to put Rapid Ext JS as a framework on top of that so that you can build applications, utilize EXTGen behind the scenes, as you'll see, and get all that visual editing and development capability. We are still early in the life cycle. We began a beta of the product earlier this year. We are still in the beta. As I said, I will talk to you about how you acquire the beta product. And if you want to think about this product as ever evolving into more and more of the functionality that Sencha Architect has, that's probably a fair thing to conclude. Architect will continue to be a product and will continue for the foreseeable future. There's a lot of functionality in that product, but as we move forward with Rapid Ext JS, the intent is to provide more and more of the capabilities that you see in the Architect product. So with all that, let's start looking at how you acquire the beta, how you install it. We'll then look at how you use the product. And probably the first thing to do is to check out the blog post that was done when we first started the beta back in January. What this blog does is give you an overview of what the product is. It gives you a little bit of details as to how it works. There is a little video vignette to show you the product in action. Little bit of a feature set as you scroll down here. And you'll notice that I also have an ability to join the beta. So if I click on Join Beta, what I get to is a page which allows me to sign up for the beta by simply filling out this form. So in typical fashion, your name, email, so we can send you the details on how you acquire the product. And we send you also links to where you can send us beta feedback. So you simply fill out this form, click download now, which I've already done. And as this infers, you will get an email giving you the next steps. So what I've done in the slides here is giving you an example of what you will get in that email. So once you click the download button, you'll get this confirmation, which basically tells you that we've got your details and that we will send you 2 emails. One email will be from MyGet. MyGet is our private NPM repository, and another email just generically from Sencha that will describe the process. So 2 emails, one from Sencha as a result of signing up, and another one from MyGet to point you to the actual extension, the beta extension. So this is the second email, the one from Sencha. As you can see here, it just gives you a little bit of details about the trial. It gives you a link to our Getting Started guide, which I will show you in a bit here. Links to the documentation, some examples. So enough information to get you going with the product. The examples, or the link to the examples in the documentation will bring you to the Ext JS beta documentation site. So you can see, just like with our other documentation, this set of documentation is at docs.sencha.com. And the first page that you see is an introduction page, and the second page, and the page that we're going to take a look at to learn how to install, is our install and setup page. So once you've acquired the product, I would head to this installation and setup page, and it walks you through installing and getting ready to create your first Ext JS project. So let's talk about that acquisition of the beta. So the second email that you'll get is an email from MyGet with credentials and a link to the MyGet repository for Ext JS. So your credentials will typically be your email with 2 dots instead of an ampersand, and then the last part of your email. So in my case, it was marcgusmano.gmail.com. So whatever your email is, that's typically your email. Password is Sencha, and the link, which I've repeated here, will bring you to the Ext JS repository where the Ext JS extension exists. So as you can see here, we have our beta version 0.2.0 and an ability to download that version. That's the only version that's there, so I just downloaded the latest. As you can see on the bottom of my screen, what I get is a zip file. That zip file, if I unzip it, brings me to a folder with a little simple README. But the most important thing I got is this VSIX file, which is the extension for a Visual Studio extension, Visual Studio Code extension. And this happens to be the file for Ext JS. So step 1, acquire the extension. Once you have that extension, what you will do is install that extension into Visual Studio Code. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, it's pretty simple. Just do a search for VS Code download, and you can install Visual Studio Code for Windows, for Linux, or in my case, for the Mac. It'll be a simple download. That download will produce a link to an executable, which is the Visual Studio Code environment. So here is my Visual Studio Code editor without anything loaded yet. And I can use the editor to go ahead and install the VSIX that I just downloaded. You'll notice on the left-hand side here for the editor, there's one tab for extensions. And if you click on that tab, you're going to see extensions installed in the Visual Studio Code Marketplace. With the beta, we have not yet put the product in the marketplace, so you're not going to find the product in this list. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to come up here and install directly from a .vsix file. So if I click on this link and I go over to where I've downloaded the file and just click on the VSIX link, for example, if it was this one, it basically just installs once you click install. I've already done that. I figured that would be easy just to kind of go set it up. And now, if I just do a search on Rapid EXTJS, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the extensions marketplace. What I want to go to is the list of my installed extensions. So here's the list of installed extensions that I happen to have in my environment. And Rapid Ext JS is one of the installed extensions. So once you install the product, you'll come to this page and you may need to install it, or you will need to install it if you downloaded it. But once you install it, you'll see the button change from install to uninstall. You'll see that the extension is available to any application that you create. And the biggest way you'll know that the Rapid Ext JS extension is installed is in the lower left-hand corner here on the toolbar in the bottom. You'll see the new EXTJS app button that we will soon use to create a new EXTJS application. So acquire the product, simple install, enable it for Visual Studio Code, make sure you see the new EXTJS app button, and you're basically ready to go. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about using the EXTJS application, take a look at some of the features, understand how the build process works, just give you a good tour through the application. So we'll start out by going ahead and clicking on the new EXTJS app button. What you'll get is the Create New EXTJS Project dialog. You'll notice here you have to enter an application name. I'll just call it SenchaCon. By default, you will have an application path underneath your default home folder in a folder called Sencha Gen Apps. That is changeable. There are properties of the Rapid Ext JS extension that can be changed. In this particular case, I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it in that folder. You'll notice that I'm able to generate certain 7X versions of the product, the latest being version 7.6, and we're already seeing that it is referring to the XGen open tooling tool. So I'm going to use XGen under the covers. I'm going to go ahead and generate an EXTJS 7.6 application. I need to pick which toolkit. I'll go ahead and pick Classic. I could optionally pick external packages that I might have available. I can pick my theme. I'll just go ahead and keep it as material. And I'll go ahead and log on. A couple other things I'll mention about this before I click the Create button. You can also log in using your NPM credentials if you want to use licensed features. So if you've bought the premium edition and you have some of the premium components like D3 or Pivot Grid or things like that, you're going to want to log on to be able to access those. Those will also be delivered to you as NPM packages, because again, under the covers, we're using our EXTGen tool. You can open up an existing project. So if you've already created a project and you just want to go to that project, you can do that. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and click create, and you'll see here that we're starting up integrated into the VS Code environment. And the first thing you see is an output window. This output window is showing you the output essentially of the EXTGen tool. So the EXTGen tool is very well documented. It's available on the docs.sencha.com site. So if you wanted to get some details about that, head over to docs.sencha.com, and you may need a little bit of documentation on Sencha command, because underlying EXTGen is Sencha command. You can also look up the EXTGen product by going over to Getting Started in Ext JS and installing packages from NPM is essentially the standalone tutorial on how you install the EXTGen tool if you weren't using RapidXJS. Because you are using RapidXJS, it has done the installation for you, and so you won't really need to go through all of this. I mean, you could, but all of this command line EXTGen work is going to be done visually and by the tool through the RapidXJS process. But just to know that this is here in case you might need it. So now we're into the build. We're building the required project. As you know, if you use EXTGen or you use Sencha command, the end result will be a running web server at a certain port. Port 1841 used to be the port for Sencha command. You'll notice that this port is going to be port 2020. Again, that is a parameter that can be changed if you have something already on port 2020 or you want to use a different port. That is totally up to you and totally fine. So now, as you can see, the installation has completed. A brand new Visual Studio Code project has been loaded, which is the SenchaCon project in this case that I created. All of the template files are here, they're all created, and the equivalent of Sencha App Watch is running in the background at port 2020. So again, doing that work for you allows you to immediately go ahead to your browser and go to localhost 2020. So localhost 2020 is by default the app port for RapidXJS, and I happen to have a template that has a login page. But once I log in, you can see the default template for a classic desktop application. So it's a very simple app. It's got a menu that can be collapsed. It's got a couple of menu items. It uses the grid. It's got some child menus. So it's a pretty good starter if you're going to build an application in similar structure to this. At the same time, I'm also in the code here, and I can go ahead and start editing the application. So let me kind of set my environment here so we can see both of these things at once. I don't have a lot of screen real estate, but I want to be able to allow you to see what I'm doing here. Give me 1 second here. Let me resize this. For some reason, it's not resizing for me. Here we go. All right. So I have the application here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this menu because I can then see more of what I need in the environment here. So we'll leave that at that point. And I'll just give you a quick idea of how you can use the environment. So the first thing I'll show you is the fact that the development environment and the browser are integrated together, and any update will auto update the browser. So if I, for example, went to this home page, which is under App, Desktop, Source, View, Home. So the home view here, if I make an edit to that page, it will be reflected on the browser. But before I open it, let me just let you know that we're going to now enter the visual editing environment of Rapid Ext JS. So I want to give this enough room here. Make this about that big. So as soon as I click on the view, because the Rapid Ext JS extension is installed, the editor defaults to a visual view. So you'll notice here that the page, in the same way that it shows up in the browser, shows up in the editor visually. On the right-hand side here, I have a categorized list of all of the components that I can drag and drop to the view. For example, I have buttons, I have grids, I have forms, anything that I might want to drag and drop onto the view here. I'm currently in design view. You can see that up here. I can switch to code view, which will give me just the code just as it sits on the page. And you can see here, this page is very, very full of text, and that's this big HTML property here. I can also go into a split view. It's a little bit hard to see it because I don't have a lot of screen real estate, but I could use that if I wanted to just be in code mode. I'm going to go ahead and go into design view because I'd rather show you some of the visual editing features. So again, I've got the toolbox here. I've got my visual environment. I'm able to change the screen to represent, for example, an iPhone if I'm building a mobile app or a desktop or a tablet. I'm just going to leave it to what it is right now. And we'll go ahead and bring up and drag and drop a button. Now, one thing I will tell you, in my Visual Studio Code environment, I have autosave set to true. So every time I make an edit to my code, the file will be saved. That just saves me time from having to hit the save button all the time. So when I drag and drop this button onto my window, you'll notice that over here in the code, I now have that button. Again, auto save, and then the tooling takes it one step further, auto refresh the page. So now exactly what I see here visually is what I have on the page. If I click on this button, I now get a list of the properties or the configs that are relevant to that button. So for example, one of the configs is the text property, which currently just says button. If I change that, I say click me and hit enter, of course I can spell it correctly, you'll notice that that misspelled click me is now a part of that button. All right, so for those of you who are going to be driven crazy by that, I will spell it correctly. So, and then I'm going to move this over so I don't have to keep closing the window. So here's my click me button. Here it is in design mode. Probably the next thing I might want to do is start addressing the event handler for the click button. So in the visual environment, what I can do is do a search, for example, on events. And one of the things below all the configs is the list of event bindings. So I want to handle the click event of the button, but there's also quite a few other things I might want to do or handle. I can handle before activate, after render, but we're just going to handle the click event. So you'll notice everything is reloading because some code was written, and it's being written in a best practices version 7 way. What do I mean by that? Well, if we look at the code window, we'll see that an items collection was added, one X type for a button. There's the text that I set, and then a listener for the click event that refers to a string on button click. Well, that string, because this page is built to utilize a view controller, that click event will be in the view controller that is associated with this view. And you'll notice that the view and the view controller are similarly named, so it's really easy to understand that the home view's view controller is called home view controller. And if I go over here to the home view controller, you'll notice that indeed I have a button click event, and that button click event allows me to write code for the click event of the button. Let's take this a little bit further. Let's go back to the design window, go back to design view. Let me do something else first. Let me create a new, show you a few other features. Let me create a new view package, or the collection of view controller, view model, and a SAS file for CSS. The way I do that, because all my views are organized into this view folder, is I right click on the view folder, and I have a new menu here called Generate New View Here. That brings up a Rapid EXTJS dialog that allows me to create a new view with all of the corresponding view package files. And if I start naming it, let's say I name it employee, you're going to get an employee view controller, employee view SAS file, and an employee view view model. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And you'll notice that I indeed get a new folder. It is nicely organized into its corresponding files. And if I click on the employee view, I have a template that is ready to be designed. The other thing I need to do in this particular template is have a way to get to that employee view. And the way I do that is through this menu. It turns out that this template uses a menu that is data-driven, and the menu itself is defined in the index.html file. It's really simple here, just to allow us to do things. So this is where I'm defining the menu. You can see I have home, personnel. I'm going to add another element here, and I'm going to name this one employee, and I'm going to name this employee view, which is the X type of the employee. And if you keep the naming standards the way the best practices suggested, it's real easy to just know what these things are. So this is going to be employee view. And again, auto save is on. So once I save that index.html file, I now have a new menu. I click on that new menu, and there you go. I've already added a new view and a new menu. I've written pretty much 0 lines of code so far. I added one piece of data, and starting to have my application evolve. So let's go ahead and do some design on this employee view. So again, let me put this in the corner here. Let me click on the employee view. So back to the app desktop source view folder under employee. If I click on employee view, it will bring me by default into design mode. And I'll just make this big enough so we can read things. And I'm going to go ahead and add a button again, just to give us something to click on. But this time I'll add a real simple form, a form item. I'll add a text field. I'll put that down here. And as you can see, as I'm designing, the page is keeping up with me. Everything is working. I might need a little padding on the main form. So if I click on the main form and look for padding, I think it's body padding. There it is. I'll give it a body padding of, I don't know, 50, and hit enter. So just prettying up my little form here. Now I got a little padding around it. And I want to be able to click this button and, let's say, just fill up this name field with a value. It's pretty simple, yet it'll kind of demonstrate some of the features. So one of the things I want to do is I want to utilize some of the new 7X features, and one of them being the ability to deal with references on a page. So the way to do that is I want this name field, I want this to be first name. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and change the label to first name. And again, when I hit enter, now I have first name. And I also want to give this field a reference. So I'm looking for the reference property, and I'm going to give this reference property the name of first name. So now we have a reference to that button. We've changed its name or its label as well. If we looked at the code window, we would see that. Here it is right here. I don't have an event handler. I did that on the previous one. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to design view, click on the button, go to event handlers, event bindings, find the click event, go ahead and create it. There we go. Now we have a click event. And now the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to click on this button and fill in this field. So as we know with the MVVM architecture of Ext JS, the view has a listener for the button click event that is in the view controller. So I'm right here. And I simply need to write the code to get the reference for first name and call the set text method. So that is pretty much this code right here. So this.getReferences will get all of the references on the form. I want the first name reference, and I want to set its value. I didn't create a last name. I think first name is good enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this line of code so I don't mistype it. I'm going to go back to the code and put in my one line of code. Finally, I'm writing some code to get the reference to first name and set its value to Marc. So now if I go back to the code, click the button, there we go. I mean, that's essentially the coding pattern for EXTJS. And you can see that I haven't had to write much code because a lot of the scaffolding that I need to have to be able to do things like event handling and being able to create properties and configs or modify the values, it's all done visually and through the Rapid Ext JS environment. All right, so with that, let me go back and just talk about a few other things. By the way, the slides that I've got here just describe for this particular template where the menu is, just so you have a reference to it. Again, I just created one extra JSON object and then the code to allow me to get to an object on the page and call one of its methods. Okay, so actually before I go into some of the plans here, let me go over to the documentation because there's a few things that I think are relevant to the beta. So you acquire the beta, you want to go through the installation. If you forget what I showed you, it's pretty straightforward, but this installation and setup will go through every step, the install, the VSIX, the fact that you get the new EXTJS app, creating a new app, all the things that we went through are pretty much defined in the installation and setup. This other tab here, or this other entry, are the Rapid EXTJS extension features for the beta. So these are the things that are currently in the product for the beta, and you can link to any one of these here. So it probably would be valuable to go ahead and read through this, get an idea of the kind of things you want to do. A lot of the things we've already done just to get a feel for it, but this will all be described, the toolbox. There's a couple things I probably didn't show you. You can zoom in on the palette. There's a component hierarchy. There are a couple other things in the product that are probably worthwhile to point out. So if I go back to the environment here, you'll notice that there is an action commands here. So the underlying XGen is doing a Sencha app watch on port 2020. You can stop that watch. You can rerun it. So that's what these two buttons are. You can also deal with the ability to use dynamic packages. And these commands, we'll have more commands for the GA version, but these are there now to be able to interrogate. We do intend to have a package explorer where you can see, and these are the extended packages and all the capabilities and the ability to add them to your project, things like that. So a few other features in the UI, but the primary feature, I think, is this design view that we will continue to enhance. Okay, with that, let's talk a little bit about where we're heading with the product. We're here in almost, I can't believe it, but almost the middle of 2023. We're going to continue the beta, so it's not too late. Go ahead and go through and get the product. But we've got a lot of new plans that we want to get in to the general release before we deliver it, probably by the end of the year. I don't have any firm dates, but we're working hard toward that. A lot more with generating a dynamic view of any file. Remember, no metadata, so you can come in here, you can make edits, you could go to another editor, you can come back, you can create your application. We do have intentions of allowing you to bring in, projects you've already created. You saw that button on the first page, bring in an existing project. More granularity on editing of configs. Some configs are text, but some configs might be an enumeration. Some configs might be an object. We're going to work on refining all that. You saw the creating a view of the context menu. There's probably features we're going to enhance there. The ability to download whatever SDK you want to use, whatever version of SDK you want to use, and obviously keep up with the current versions. As 7.7 comes out very soon, we'll have that as part of Ext JS. So a good number of things that we're planning for the product. If you do join the beta, a good place to maybe get some feedback or to ask some questions to the MVPs or just understand how you might build your application is to be a part of our Discord server. So there is a link that you'll get with the slides. If you forget, send me an email or talk to your sales rep. It's a good place, as I said, just to be able to ask questions or interact with other Sencha environments. And there is a rapid Ext JS topic that is part of the Discord server. All right, so that's really what I wanted to show you, give you a quick demo, make sure you understand how to use the beta, how to acquire the beta. I'll go ahead and bring this link up again. Start here at the blog. This will point you to everything you need to get to. There are a lot of links in this thing. Just simply sign up, so everything is there. I'd also welcome if you have specific questions after the session to get a hold of me, and I'd be happy to answer those. But in light of the fact that we're here live in the SenchaCon session, I'm going to see if we have any questions, and we'll use the rest of the session to be able to answer any questions you might have. Jim, I'm assuming you're there somewhere.
I am here, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. So do we have any questions?
So if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the question panel there to the right, and we will get them answered for you here. The first question is, how does Sencha EXTJS compare to Sencha Architect?
You probably mean how does Rapid Ext JS compare to Sencha Architect?
Yes, yeah, I misread that.
That's all right, because they both, one thing they have in common, given we just said Ext JS, is they both allow you to build EXTJS or EXTJS applications. They both do visual drag and drop design. So in that way, there's a lot of parallels. I mentioned the biggest differentiator, which is we're building the Rapid Ext JS product without a requirement to have dependent metadata. And so far, so good on that. Sencha Architect is a lot richer at the moment. I mean, it's been out a long time, but it has a similar look and feel. It has a list of components. You can drag and drop components. You can do event bindings, but there are a lot of features that have evolved throughout the years of the product. We are using that as inspiration for the Rapid Ext JS tool. There is a lot of evolution to JavaScript and to the ability to do things within a Visual Studio Code extension that we're taking advantage of. So that's going to be different. You're not tied to the architect editor. We are not going to philosophically do what architect does, which is restrict you to editing only certain areas. So for example, if you drag a button on an architect palette, create a click event, you can only write code in that click event. You can't tinker with other parts of the view on purpose. That was the idea, was that we didn't want you to break anything else, but completely different philosophy here. We are giving you the ability to break something, I guess, but you can edit anything you want and the editor will adapt to that. And there's obviously going to be fringe use cases where that's not going to be the case, but that's the goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. That was my one thing when I use Sencha Architect that I found is this, like, I wish it let me edit more. So that's great.
Yeah, you keep clicking on things. It's like you can't click on it like 5 times and all of a sudden the editor will pop up. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I just had something pop up over my question window here. Can I use other editors if I created an app with Rapid EXTJS?
Absolutely. We want you to be able to use the editor of your choice. As a matter of fact, going back to the idea that we already have an extension for VS Code, a plugin. We have plugins for IntelliJ, for Eclipse, for Visual Studio, the paid for product from Microsoft. They're not visual. So we're hoping you're going to like the visual tool and want to go this direction. But absolutely, you start a project in Visual Studio Code and you want to bring up Eclipse or Notepad or whatever and make additional edits, absolutely. We are not going to tie any dependency onto Visual Studio Code. Maybe someday we'll consider other environments, but we're feeling that doing this first in one editor that is very well used, very well accepted, and has a great extension environment is a sound choice. So of course we'd like to hear feedback, but that for the foreseeable future, that's where we're going to invest, is in the Visual Studio Code environment.
That's great. I think that makes sense.
Yep.
How is Rapid Ext JS different from the current VS Code plugin?
Aha, that's a good question. So the current VS, probably real short answer to that is the VS Code plugin is not visual. Not visual in terms of drag and dropping components and being able to visually change configs. It doesn't do any of that. What the plugin does do is it hooks into essentially the documentation. So it'll give you IntelliSense, or the equivalent of, I'm an old Microsoft guy, so I don't know if IntelliSense has become like the standard name, but it'll give you the ability to know for an object what the configs are, and it'll show you a list of those. I call that IntelliSense. So it'll do that. It'll give you some refactoring capabilities. It allows you to generate a new application, but again, not visually, not as visual as Rapid Ext JS is. So there's a bit of an overlap. And like I said, I could see the day when we merge potentially the two, but what's really nice about the Visual Studio Code extension environment is you can have 20, 30 extensions installed and they all work together doing whatever they're doing. So you can have the VS Code current extension and this Rapid Ext JS extension both up, both running, working together. So that's the best of both.
Okay, yeah, great. I was going to ask that next, so good.
And by the way, I know these environments change so quick. I think VS Code puts out a new version every month, so it's things change, and we've realized that with the new 7.7 release, we're really focusing on getting the plugins to the latest version. So very, very shortly, the version 7.7 is coming out shortly. You'll have the latest version of VS Code, and you'll have the Rapid Ext JS beta, and it'll be a nice environment.
Yeah, they're actually required because VS Code uses the the Chromium engine with Electron requires that you update, I think, like every month or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but there is a requirement.
Yeah,
if you use it, you have to update it that often.
It's a big open source project. They have a lot of things. I mean, it's an amazing environment. I mean, there's so many things. There's so many extensions. Go to the marketplace. I mean, I use VS Code all the time, so I think it's great. It performs well. But it may not be your choice of what you're using, but in this particular case, maybe it'll turn you in this direction.
I think VS Code is one of those editors that I think most developers have in their tool belt along with other editors.
Yep,
right?
Yep.
I love keeping Ultra Edit around because it can edit those big files, for example.
To remember all the commands and all the edit. I'm so used to doing things in VS Code. If I'm using maybe with a customer another editor, I'll still have VS Code there because I know how to do a find in files, and I know how to do things without having to look it up. So I might have more than one.
So next question is, how does Rapid EXTJS work with existing 7.x applications using Sencha command?
Well, it has an ability to bring in an existing application. Since the Rapid EXTJS environment understands Sencha command. Remember, Sencha command is underneath all of this. Sencha command, then XGen, and then Rapid EXTJS. So it completely understands the Sencha command application because it's based on Sencha command. So it will bring in an existing project. And since there's no metadata, as soon as you bring in that project, you click on a view and you have visual editing. So it will handle that very well. There's going to be edge cases, things that we're going to have to, we might discover. One of the biggest things we want to be able to do is also bring in Sencha Architect projects. Remember, it has metadata. As soon as you do that, though, you're going to lose the ability to go back to Architect because this is another editor. So both those things are on the docket.
And that's the beautiful thing about the beta right now is people can get on the beta and discover those edge cases. And if it's a big deal, maybe it still can get fixed.
If there's something, this is the time. I mean, we're looking for that feedback. There is a form you fill out. We want to know before we, solidify all the features. So if there's something you need, let us know.
Can we use a Rapid EXTJS on a project created with Sencha Architect? We asked that one already, didn't I? Yep.
You can, but again, you're not going to be able to go back to Sencha Architect because you're in another editor and you start editing. So we're not keeping the metadata. This Rapid EXTJS doesn't even know what a metadata is. The metadata of Architect is not even a part of it. So the answer is yes. You might want to figure out a strategy where you go back and forth in a controlled way, but that could be a little bit of a challenge. So.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about a community of developers is they're good at figuring out ways around things.
Come up with a way.
It's always impressive. Can I bring, I guess the answer to this is also yes. Can I bring my existing EXTJS code to Rapid EXTJS?
Yep. Yeah, at the end of the day, again, if you looked at this project, if I took away Rapid EXTJS, it would just look like a project that you generated with XGen. I mean, there's no configs in here. There's no additional files. I mean, there's the files that you're used to with XGen. There's an app.json, just like, any XGen or Sencha command project. We're not adding any tool-specific files. That's the beauty of it. So it can handle any project that's built with Sencha command for sure.
So we've got 5 minutes till the next session starts. So we're going to kind of get through these last questions here quickly. Right. What's about to build a development or product version for development?
If the question is about building and deploying for production, that would be this run build. Okay. Do a build, production build. If there is something that we didn't implement, via a button, remember, XGen is under this. So there is absolutely no reason you can't do this. Go into terminal and do XGen directly because that's what it's built on. Or to be honest with you, Sencha command directly. I mean, you could have all of that stuff running. You could have a terminal window with Sencha command. You can have XGen running. You could use the visual tools. It's all just working together.
And how do you integrate a Rapid Ext JS with a Java servlet application?
Well, it depends on what you're doing with the servlet. If it's all server based, I mean, typically a Sencha application, an EXTJS application is going to communicate via AJAX calls with JSON structures. And if you're doing that, then from that standpoint, acquiring data is done that way. If there's somehow you're integrating some Java shell capabilities, Rapid EXTJS isn't going to change the way you do it. I guess it depends on your use case. If you have something specific and it would be helpful to dive in a little, just send me an email. Maybe we can talk further.
All right, great. So that is it. We're at the top of the hour, almost top of the hour. I got 4 minutes left. So thank you so much, Marc, for that session and for exciting look at this new tool. Hopefully everybody jumps out and signs up for the beta.
Very good.
Yeah, and so coming up next, we have Sencha EXTJS Inspect and Debug with Max.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the conference.
And I do have a poll here for everybody to see if you're signed up for the Rapid EXTJS beta yet. If you want to go out and fill out that poll real quick, see if you're not signed up for the beta or not, just to kind of see where people are at with this, all the attendees today. And I can see the results live, and signed up already jumped to the top right away. So the really excited ones, everybody that's really excited to be here and part of the day, the ones that are on top of it, man, they're signed up, ready to go. So I'll let this run here for a couple more minutes, but we do have, it looks like 3 minutes for our next session to start with Max Radar on Sencha EXTJS Inspect and Debug. So I think that's most everybody's voted. Well, all right, they're still trickling in. Not most everybody's voted, but I think everybody that's going to vote has voted since it's slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and we can take a look at the responses here. We have majority or half the people, half of everybody's already signed up for it. A few people aren't sure what Rapid EXTJS is, so apparently you missed the last session all about Rapid EXTJS. Luckily, you can catch the replay. It'll be up on the Sencha landing page. And then about 20% people are planning to sign up later today, and about a third are looking forward to the release. So that's great. Great to see some people already signed up for the beta. You can find more information. There'll be a link to the beta on the landing page, or there's one on the Sencha homepage as well.